This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss, co-host of PBS's MotorWeek. He'll take your calls and comments now at 844-885-4677 or email him at radio@goss-garage.com. And now, Pat Goss.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Goss's Garage. I'm Pat Goss. If you would like to talk about anything that deals with cars or something with an engine in it, give me a call. 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-4677. Now, I may not know all the answers, and I certainly don't, but I do know where to find answers, and we'll work our way through your problem. All right, now, here's a thought for you. Now, 19 is a good number, but for me, it suggests the end of common sense behind the wheel. You see, 19 is the number of cup holders in a newly introduced SUV. But what do cup holders and common sense share? Well, not much, really, but the headline read, "New SUV from Belchfire Motors has 19 cup holders and seats 8 people. 8 people and 19 cup holders? I don't know how that works, but anyway, let me get this straight. 19 cup holders is the story, not the power, the transmission, the safety features, or other things like ride or handling. Nope, the headline was 19 cup holders. Whether it's 2 or 19 cup holders are a damn poor reason to select one car over another. But it's part of the destruction of drivers and the joy of driving. In the name of safety, vehicle manufacturers are installing a ton of new safety features on their cars. These safety features are designed to supplement, that's the key word, supplement your driving skills. But they're having exactly the opposite effect. They're making cars safer, but making worse drivers. Let's take blind spot warning, which warns you if there's a car already in the lane you're going to move into. If there is a car in your blind spot, the system warns you with flashing lights or warning buzzers or a vibrating steering wheel or seat. Pretty neat stuff that works reasonably well most of the time. Or how about autonomous braking, which uses sensors to look around your car to determine if you might hit someone or something. If this system senses a collision is imminent, it waits, and if you don't apply the brakes, the system does it for you. So, if these systems work, what's the issue? The issue is really very simple. All these systems are supposed to be backups for your good driving. But for many of you, these systems become primary, not fail-safe backups, simply because you're too lazy to be a good driver. Even if your car has blind spot warning, you should still turn your head and look over your shoulder before changing lanes, just like everyone should have been doing since cars were first invented. Same with autonomous braking, which is neat to play with, but you should be driving in such a way that you've stopped long before the auto braking system is needed. With blind spot, you should already know what's happening by the time the blind spot warning goes off. You should be the primary control every minute you're behind the wheel. Now, although these systems work well, there is one thing they all lack. None of them can think or make decisions. Every one of these systems looks at things in black and white or on and off. None of these systems can look at the surroundings and tell that there are extenuating circumstances that must be considered. So far, no artificial system can decide based on morality or anything other than reacting to a specific object that triggers a sensor. They cannot decide on anything that's happening unless it's something the system has been programmed to recognize, and that thing is in the pre-programmed range of a sensor. Driving a car is a complex mental exercise that requires using your brain and common sense. Be a good driver first and rely on your slick new safety systems solely as backups for your occasional brain fart, not all the time. All right, yes, these systems are wonderful. I have them on my car. I have autonomous braking. I have blind spot. I have lane keeping. I have all of these things. And I know that it's really easy to fall into the habit of not paying attention. But really, you are the driver. You're also the person that's responsible if something goes wrong. You know, we don't like, in today's world, we don't seem to like to take personal responsibility for anything. Oh, well, it was this that caused it. It wasn't me. No, it wasn't me. It was this thing or that person or that action. It's always somebody or something else that caused it, instead of just stepping out and say, okay, I screwed up. So we don't like to take responsibility for these things, but really, we really should. And we should make it a concerted effort to be better drivers. That would be a good thing to look into and consider doing for this new year, 2018 already. Hey, we've got a call here from Brian out in North Idaho. Let's talk to Brian, see what he's got going on. Brian, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Yeah, good morning, Pat. How are you?
Okay. Cold?
Good. Yeah, that's what I just asked your producer. I says, how are you guys weathering the storm back there? I've been kind of watching it on the news.
Right.
We're having unseasonably warm weather where I'm at. First, a comment on this segment you just did. You know, I'm a hobbyist pilot, and a good analogy for what you're talking about is all the professional pilots that I've spoken to, the modern airplanes will do everything down to about 200 feet just before the plane lands. And all the good pilots I've talked to says they don't use the autopilot unless they're on a long, arduous flight because they get to be lazy pilots. It's exactly the same thing as you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody balks at your attitude towards this, ask them which pilot they would rather have flying their airplane. The one that flies it himself so he don't get lazy, or the one that only uses it when he has to.
Right,
so,
exactly.
Good analogy. Yeah. Okay, so my question this morning, Pat, is on automatic transmissions. I've spoken to you in the past. I'm doing two project cars, 269 Fairlanes. One of them is an automatic and one of them is a standard. Now, the automatic I'm going to turn into my daily driver, and then the other one I'm going to build is my show car.
Mm-hmm.
The one I'm going to make the driver out of sat like under an apple tree in somebody's yard for 32 years.
Oh my goodness!
Luckily, it was parked and not. Yeah, luckily it was parked and not touched. So the air cleaner and air cleaner element, everything was in place, so no critters, no weather got inside the engine. And I had it running in about 25, 30 minutes. Filed the point, stuck a battery in it. Didn't even do anything to the carburetor. Filled the float bowl and it fired up. The automatic went right into gear. I did have to top off the fluid. Put about half a quart in. Fluid smelled good, looked good, didn't taste too bad, and,
all right.
And it works. Yeah, and it worked. Went into gear. I drove it just far enough to go through all the gears, so it went through first, second, and third, back to the house. Reverse, of course, works too. Now, here's my question. I did talk to an automatic transmission repairman who's in business for himself now. He was in the industry for X amount of years. He's retired and just does it to make extra money. That's all I know about the guy. But he told me that when these things set that long, because my thought was this: it works. I'm going to drive it. If it breaks, I've got a spare. I'll stick it in. But he says that sometimes what will happen is moisture will build up inside those transmissions when they set. You'll get rust, and you can actually damage the transmission further than it is. Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, sure, that's possible. See, I would have approached this a little bit differently. when you first got the vehicle, you check the dipstick and so on, fluid is clean. The reason the fluid is clean is after sitting all that time, all the contamination and everything has dropped out of solution and is laying in the bottom of the pan. So before we start one of those up or anything, because we get a few older cars like that that we bring back to life, first thing we do is drop the pan, and we'll usually find like 1/4 of an inch of crud laying in there. Fluid looks like brand new. Smells good, everything looks fine. But we drop the pan, we scrape all that stuff out, then we refill it, start it, drive it, and so on. I would say probably, depending on what the condition and the mileage was on the transmission before it was put in storage, we probably see 10% of them or so that fail probably within the first 1,000 miles or so. The other 90% just change the fluid and they get on with life.
Yeah. Well, so far, I probably got lucky then. You know, the thing's been run, and you know, I guess as long as it's running, that pump's running, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it still looks good, still smells good. It's probably got 45 minutes to a good hour of run time, you know, probably 6 minutes of actual drive time.
Mm-hmm.
But and everything still looks good. So, you know, I'll just take it from there. But that's
yeah,
what
I'd drop the pan and change the fluid in it and, you know, just give it an eyeball, so if there's a piece of anything laying in the pan, you can take evasive action. But other than that, fresh fluid and drive it. If it fails, what's going to happen, and it really isn't going to do any more damage per se, is that the clutches are going to fail in it, and that's going to spew a lot of crap around inside the transmission, but it normally doesn't cause hard parts to break or anything like that unless you try forcing it, and then you'll overheat it and that'll burn up the planetaries or drums and some things like that. But you know, essentially, you know, it doesn't change anything. If it's going to fail, it's going to fail, and it doesn't cost any more to do it then than it does now.
Okay, well, I think I'll take a chance and just leave it as, if it ain't broke, I'm not going to fix it, I guess.
Yeah.
I know common on these C4s when they set those actuator O-rings that run those that run the actuator pistons for the first and I think
right, the
first,
servos.
reverse, and second, and third.
Yeah.
Yeah, the servos. I guess those seals can dry out and crack, but it's working. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, that's what I wanted to know.
You'll know
I appreciate
in
you
short order. One of
yeah.
the primary things that happened on those was servo seal would go bad on them, and you wouldn't have, I forget now, it's been a long time, but it was either drive or reverse until you sat with it in gear for 30 to 45 seconds, and the fluid moving past the seal would warm it up, and it would swell, then it would seal, and then the car would move. So whether they sat or didn't sit, that was a common problem.
All right, Pat. Well, I appreciate your knowledge.
Okay, enjoy the warm weather.
Yeah. Well, I'll stay out of the cold.
Okay, will do. All right, let's talk to Don from Crystal Lake, Illinois, 2012 Toyota Camry Hybrid. Don, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Oh, glad to be here, Pat. Last week, listening to your show, you had some good comments that kind of has me perplexed. On this Camry Hybrid of mine, Toyota, the manufacturer, says that that transmission, which is a CVT, is a sealed unit, and you're not supposed to break it open to change the fluid. They claim that the fluid will last a lifetime. Now, you know, you suggested around 30,000 miles to change fluid.
Right.
Now, were you speaking specifically on your conventional transmissions, or should I include that on the CVTs?
Well, the CVTs certainly have had, especially older ones, have had a lot more problems than conventional transmissions. Now they're reaching parity with a regular transmission. But the fact is, yes, the fluid will last the life of the transmission. Absolutely. Now, what is the life of the transmission? Well, the life of the transmission is when the fluid causes the transmission to fail. So it's a true statement, but it's a self-serving statement because the fluid will go bad. There is no such thing on planet Earth as any type of lubricant that lasts forever. And once it does go bad, then there'll be slippage. Once you have slippage, then you have overheating. Once you have overheating in the transmission, then parts start to fail. So my statement about flushing and so on was a generic statement, applies to CVTs and so on. The big thing is that you have to make sure that you select a good shop that knows what they're doing and doesn't try to use some universal fluid or something like that.
Okay, well, I think I'll follow your advice then, because I would like this car to last for a long time, and I guess you can't really hurt it by doing extra maintenance, even though Toyota claims that you don't have to.
Well, you have to remember that vehicle manufacturers, they make their money by selling cars and by selling replacement parts. And certainly they want you to be happy with the car, and most people would be happy with 100,000 miles these days. But the reality is that the average car with good preventive maintenance can go roughly 250,000 miles, maybe more, without any major breakdowns. And if you amortize the fixed costs of a vehicle over 100,000 miles and over 200,000 miles, at the 200,000 mile mark, the cost per mile in fixed expenses is cut right in half. So it's estimated that for every dollar you spend on preventive maintenance, you'll get back $8 in extended life and less repair bills.
Okay, well, I'm definitely going to take your advice, and whether if I decide to take it to Toyota to do that, or we do have a really top-notch transmission shop here in town, but I'd probably feel better about changing that fluid than rolling the dice and just leaving it sealed up the way they're talking about it.
Yeah.
But definitely appreciate your advice there, Pat.
Well, it wouldn't make sense if you're looking at 80 or 90,000 miles, but if you want to go the distance, a lot of miles, a lot of years, then the key to all of this is preventive maintenance.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pat. Appreciate it.
Take care. Thank you. All right, we're going to take a break. 844-885-4677. Give us a call during the break. Love to talk to you. Goss's Garage will be right back.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Never drive with a bad attitude. I know that's hard with so many stupid, distracted, aggressive, and just plain rude drivers on the road, but it really is the safe thing to do. I drive a lot, and I used to see reckless, rude, or aggressive drivers maybe once a month. But today, it seems like every other driver is doing something stupid. When it was sporadic, it wasn't so hard to deal with, but now it seems like there's always an idiot 3 feet from my rear bumper or weaving into my lane or cutting me off. Distracted? Probably. Dangerous? Absolutely. But there's nothing to do except drive defensively and not aggravate other drivers. Much as I'd like to, I don't middle finger the offending driver, and definitely don't hit my brakes to scare a tailgater. Initially, these situations may be simple mistakes, but an aggressive response to a mistake can escalate it into a personal confrontation which can easily turn into road rage. Unfortunately, you have no idea which one of these idiots will try to hurt you with their car, a weapon, or their fists. Also, never make direct eye contact with the offending driver. If you're the offender, be courteous and get out of the way. Whether it's a mistake or intentional aggression, remember, back down, yield, let it go. It takes brains to overcome anger. Use your brain. Be smart. This news and views is from Auto Care Pro magazine and deals with automatic transmissions. Although their story relates to an Audi that refused to shift, it could apply to most cars. In this case, the tech did all the proper preliminary tests, including a visual inspection of related parts, which revealed a badly corroded transmission computer. Seems someone had replaced the cabin air filter and didn't properly install its cover. Now, this allowed water to leak onto the computer, and over time the water caused corrosion and no shift. A new module made the Audi shift like new. The tech also reinstalled the cabin air filter cover properly. There are two primary lessons here. First, just because the symptoms are horrific doesn't mean the cause is horrific. In fact, seemingly huge problems may be cheap to fix. Second, this is a case where you'll probably be taken if you didn't pick a good shop. That's because you've already convinced yourself you need a major repair. And when the shop confirms what you suspect, you just go for it. This shop could have easily sold a completely unnecessary transmission, but instead was honest and saved the owner thousands of dollars. So select your shop carefully. Rather than just cheap, look for ASE certification, skill, quality, and above all, honesty. Too often, the cheapest estimates come from shops with overall lower skill sets, or in some cases, something much worse, more greed and less honesty.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677.
For those of you enjoying Goss's Garage on TuneIn.com, please note our new showtime every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. 844-885-4677. Write it down. You can call us 24/7. Leave us a message. We'll get back to you, or we'll play your message on the air and answer your question. That's 844-885-4677. Right now, let's go to Clinton, Maryland, and talk to Verlene about an Infiniti with a noise. Verlene, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Good morning.
Hi. What's going on?
Okay, sometimes my car seems like it is, it's making a humming noise, and it seems like it is coming from under the hood on the driver's side, and sometimes it sounds like it's coming from the wheels.
All right. Now, does it only make the noise when it's moving?
Yes. Uh-huh.
All right. It won't make the noise sitting still.
No, it doesn't. I don't think make the noise sitting still. Most of the time I'm driving, I believe.
Okay. Well, the very first thing that I would check, if the noise is only when the car is moving, I would check the hub bearings or axle bearings, whatever the shop wants to call them, but the bearing that the wheel rides on, and because it sounds like it's coming from the left front, that would be the one I would concentrate on.
Uh-huh.
So that is a relatively common problem with lots of different cars these days, and you get a kind of a humming or rumbling noise as the car moves.
Right.
So.
Okay, and also I have another problem. Like sometimes when I turn my car real sharp, either backing up, stepping on the brakes, it makes like a clicking, knocking sound.
Ooh,
I turn it real sharp.
Okay. Well, that may change the picture here a little bit, because that would suggest that you have a bad outer CV joint in one of the axles. So I mean, this is a repeated clicking, click, 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 click? Or is it just one?
Well, it just sometimes does that. It doesn't do it all the time.
Right.
Sometimes.
But when it does it, is it click, 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 or is it just click?
Just click.
Just one click?
Just click, like maybe if I turn it real sharp or something, trying to park or something, it may get a clicking sound.
Okay, but it just does one click. It's not repeated, not as the car moves.
No, it's not repeating itself.
Okay.
Just like
All
when
right.
I first turn it or something.
All right. Then the first thing to look at there are things called steering stops that limit how far the wheels can turn. And they're typically two pieces of metal. And for some reason, technicians never lubricate these things. And they're supposed to be lubricated because when you turn the wheel real hard, these two pieces of metal come together. They butt up against one another, and they'll make different kinds of noises. And so they're supposed to put a layer of grease on them so they don't make noise. Most technicians don't do that. Most technicians don't even know what a steering stop is these days. So have somebody take 30 seconds and lubricate the steering stops and see if that corrects that problem. And it literally takes 30 seconds.
Oh, only 30 seconds? Okay.
Yeah, it's just nothing to it. You put a little grease on the end of your finger and go swipe across the surface of the steering stop, and that's all there is to it.
Oh, okay. So is these two things major, real major or something like that? I need to get it into a shop real fast?
The steering stop isn't. The bearing will be that way at some point. Usually, if it's a bearing, as time goes on, the noise will get worse and worse. And when that starts to happen, then you want to get it in right away.
Right away, okay. Yeah, because I bought my car to you once before for something dealing with the wheels, and you fixed that for me.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Appreciate it. All righty.
Yes, and I'm sure I'll be using you again.
Okay. All right, you take care.
Thanks for all this information.
Stay out of the cold. It is bitter out there. All right. Yeah, these noises and things like that. And the reason I ask all of these questions is because part of diagnosing a problem is to look at the various symptoms, just like I did with the possibility of steering stops making noise. Was it one click or is it repeated clicks? If it's repeated, click, 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 click as the car moves, that usually indicates a bad CV joint. But one single solitary click, that equals something different. So then we plug that into the equation. Okay, we have one click. We have it only when the wheels are turned hard, like in parking or something like that. So what comes into play at that point that could make a noise? Well, we have steering stops, and that is easy. It's 30 seconds to lubricate them. Let's get that out of the way. And while we're under there lubricating the steering stops, let's just kind of look at other things that might be a possibility and approach it that way so that we aren't just randomly guessing. We're using some logic to the diagnostic procedure, and that we're setting it up for least expensive first. I know it's tempting when you own a business to go for the most expensive, but I've been doing this a lot of years, and I have found that people appreciate you're going to the least expensive first instead of the most expensive, and that's part of what has made it possible for me to be in business all these years. And your support and everything, you're bringing your cars to my shops and so on, I really sincerely appreciate it. We're going to take a break. Goss's Garage will be right back. Give me a call, 844-885-4677.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Space Saver spare tires sure do look silly, but if you use them properly, they will get you home safely. Now, a common problem with them is low air pressure. Spares are buried in the trunk and no one ever seems to check their pressure. Plus, they typically require much higher pressure than your regular tires. Also, Space Saver spares have limits on how far and how fast you can drive on them. Bottom line, always read and follow the caution warnings on their labels and sidewalls. Oh yeah, don't be one of those poor schmucks with a flat tire and a flat spare. Check your spare once a month. While checking the spare, look at the jack handle, and the lug wrench to be sure everything is there and in working order. The best spare tire in the world is useless without the tools to put it on the car. Some cars may even require special lug nuts to mount the spare. If those special lug nuts are missing, you will have no safe way to use your spare. Do you use the proper strategy when buying replacement parts for your car or truck? Hi, I'm Pat Goss for Goss's Garage, and I've noticed that many of you who buy auto parts make a huge mistake. You shop for one and only one thing: price. Now, naturally, price is important, but quality is more important. When you buy the cheapest part in town, you may sacrifice quality, and less quality often means shorter life and less reliability. In some cases, the cheapest part may even compromise vehicle safety. For the best value from the parts you buy, look for the lowest price, but only on high-quality parts. When you compare prices, be sure you're comparing parts that have the same specifications. And never buy a part with a lower rating than your car requires. What many drivers don't realize is cheap can be very costly in the end. Quality usually costs less per mile over the long haul. I'm Pat Goss for Goss's Garage.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. And now, Pat Goss.
Folks, please subscribe to Goss's Garage on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, and for more car tips, tricks, and money-saving ideas, visit goss-garage.com. Remember that number, 844-885-4677. Love to talk to you, and you can call that number 24/7. Leave us a message. We'll get back to you, or we'll play your question on the show and answer your question. If I don't know the answer, I do know where to find the answer. So let's keep that in mind. 844-885-4677. All right, now we have a call from Rodney.
Yes, my name is Rodney Dorr, and my phone number is...
All right, we're not going to play his phone number. We never play your numbers.
05. And I got the milky liquid stuff in my radiator overflow tank, but there's none of it in the oil dipstick. The oil in the dipstick looks fine, nice and clear. So I'm not sure if it's a head gasket or not. Thank you.
All right, would it be a head gasket? Probably not. It's possible. The thing that we do, because there's all sorts of ways for oil to get into the cooling system, the things that we do. Number one, you look at the hoses, and if the hoses look like they're weeping, as if they had tears on them in spots, or the hoses look shiny, then the first thing you suspect is that there's a reasonable amount of oil in the cooling system. And what do you suspect? You do not suspect a head gasket. you suspect that the transmission cooler in the radiator is starting to leak, and transmission fluid is leaking into the cooling system. And based on what you're saying here, that's where I would start my search, is by checking the transmission cooler, because you may well have transmission fluid, which will make the coolant milky and so on. You may have a transmission cooler that's starting to leak. All right, now Stan. Stan has an interesting question. He says that with all of this cold weather, and we're talking about wind chill and how it affects us and so on, he wants to know how wind chill affects cars. Well, I hate to tell you, but wind chill doesn't affect cars. Now, wind might blow snow under the hood and different things like that, but as far as wind chill is concerned, wind chill is based on the rate of evaporation of moisture from your body and stuff like that. Well, cars don't have nervous systems, they don't have body, they don't perspire, they don't have any of this stuff. So as far as a car is concerned, the temperature is the temperature. Doesn't feel any colder to the car than it actually is. If it's 20 degrees, that's what it is for the car. Where with us, with the wind blowing over us, it changes the way our body loses heat, and we feel a lot colder. But even if cars could feel, they wouldn't feel wind chill. So, you know, that's an age-old question there, but anyway, I thought I would answer it just because it is so cold in so much of the country. All right, Andrew writes, Dear Pat, been a listener for well over a decade and still very much appreciate all your rented lips again, outreach and what you do. And keep pissing off all the haters and trolls. They're not worth any energy spent. Couldn't agree more. I own a 2015 Audi S6. It has a dual-clutch 7-speed S-tronic automatic transmission. I have a local shop here in San Jose, California, that does most of the BG flushes and services, and is a big fan of the preventive maintenance that you recommend. So I've been using them for cooling, brake flushes, intake service, etc. I asked them to do a transmission flush, and after researching a bit, they said the transmission in my car is a bit exotic, complicated, and they weren't comfortable doing it. I appreciated their candor, but I'm at a bit of a loss. I asked my local Audi dealer, who seemed confused as to why I would want a transmission flush, then quoted me $600 to do it. Also seemed odd. Any guidance you could provide here? Is my transmission indeed so exotic? Any hints as to how I can ask for and be sure I'm getting the right service beyond asking for a transmission flush? Not sure if I'm doing something wrong or just haven't yet found the right shop. Well, Andrew, there's a combination of things here. First, exotic, a dual clutch transmission, exotic, maybe 20 years ago. You know, they're garden variety these days. They're available in most entry-level cars that, you know, the little econo boxes and stuff like that. So I would hardly call them exotic by any stretch of the imagination. Only exotic if you don't know what they are. You see, just about anything that you don't understand is going to be exotic to you. So apparently your shop doesn't read as much as they should, or they would know that a dual clutch transmission is essentially a manual transmission. It's not an automatic. It's a manual transmission, but more specifically, it is two manual transmissions paired together inside one case. Now, the dual clutch comes from the fact that most of these use a shaft inside a shaft. Now, why do they do that? Well, they have two clutches. One of them attaches to the outer shaft. The other one attaches to the inner shaft. Now, the problem with manual transmissions is that when you shift gears, you lose forward momentum because you disengage the clutch, you take the power away, the car drops off in speed, and then you have to regain that speed and move forward. Well, on a dual clutch transmission, what happens is that you're moving down the road and you have one of the clutches engaged, driving gears through one of the tubes. Now, the other clutch is already engaged, but it's not doing anything. It's sitting there ready. So when it's time for the transmission to shift, the computer controls solenoids that shift from one clutch to the other and shift the gears and so on. So as they disengage one gear, they simultaneously, there's no loss in speed, there's no loss in power or anything like that. It's simultaneous that one clutch disengages and the other clutch engages at the same time, moving it up to a different gear. Now, one clutch controls all of the odd-numbered gears, the other clutch all of the even-numbered gears. Now, because of the way this works, many of these things, we're talking about shifting in milliseconds, thousandths of a second. So there is virtually no energy loss from the gear shifting process. All right, now, these things have pumps in them and so on, because when you're sitting at a traffic light, this has to be primed and ready. So there's an electric pump that keeps all of the control devices and everything primed and ready so that when you take your foot off the brake and step on the accelerator, what's going to happen is instantly the car is going to move because it's going to be ready to move because clutches and everything are already in position, gears are in position, and so on. But in order to do that, they have a pump and a small hydraulic system and so on. Well, this fluid inside the transmission has to be kept clean, just like in an automatic, but you don't have a torque converter and all the other things that you have in an automatic transmission. You have these two manual transmissions, and guess what? There is no flushing. So you're wrong in asking for a flush because they can't be flushed because they don't have circulating pumps and torque converters and stuff like that. What they do have is the same thing you'd have with any manual transmission, and that is they have a drain plug. So what do? You drain the fluid, just pull the plug out, drain the fluid, and then there's a fill plug. You put new fluid in the fill after you have put the drain plug back in. Drain it, put the plug back in, just like changing oil on the engine, refill it. Now, a couple things. Some of these are hard to get to the fill plug. So, you have to make sure that whoever is going to do this service for you has the appropriate tools and adapters and so on to get back up in there to refill it. You never drain one of these until you know that you have a way to refill it, because you'd be in deep stuff if you drain it and then you can't refill it. Now you're in trouble and you're going to have it towed someplace because you can't drive it, and you're going to be hating life. So, yeah, and they do need to be changed because the fluid for all of this needs to be clean and of the right viscosity and so on. So that, my friends, is how we deal with dual clutch. These are the things that are so commonplace these days. Manual transmissions have, for the most part, gone away, being replaced, even in exotic cars, being replaced by dual clutch transmissions because the dual clutch shifts so much faster than any human could ever shift. So it's, I mean, you can't even think about shifting in the same amount of time that one of these dual clutch transmission can shift and be done with it. So keep that in mind. All right, we'll take our last break. 844-885-4677. Give me a call. We'll be right back on Goss's Garage.
Operators are standing by to take your call for Pat at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Think you'll pocket a lot more money if you sell rather than trade your car? Perhaps, but appearance sells cars, and your poor car is a bit grungy. There's dull paint, that ugly coffee stain on the seat, and a sweaty arm stain on the door, plus crumbs in every crack and crevice. Yep, when you look close, it's kind of ugly, and sadly for you, most used cars are bought on looks more than condition. That means a good cleanup job or pay a couple $100 to have it done. Next, because many used car buyers pull dipsticks and check fluids, you should clean the engine bay and change all the fluids. Buyers usually don't know what's good or bad, but someone on the internet says smart shoppers pull dipsticks, so buyers pull dipsticks, which often leads to questions about service and possible problems. Also, if the tires show any wear, buyers may assume there are worn front end parts. Don't forget the high cost of ads so people know it's for sale. And the questions. Is there a warranty? Will you take a trade? Is it inspected? Will you take a check? Can I give you $100 down and $100 a week? And so on. Now, a biggie. You might actually be risking your life, too. Where do you safely show a car so you don't have strangers eyeballing you and your home or trying to steal the car? When you look at the aggravation, work, expense, and dangers of selling a car, trading often looks really good. I get lots of air filter questions, and one of the most common deals with why air filters need to be replaced so often. Well, actually, they usually don't. Yet many drivers wind up buying a new air filter at every oil change, which is utterly ridiculous. Drivers say techs tell them if they don't buy a new air filter, they'll waste a lot of gas. Maybe that statement comes from ignorance or maybe dishonesty, but either way, you lose. Decades ago, dirty air filters did waste gas, but today, not so much. Cars now use a sensor to measure the air coming through the air filter, and computers to mix exactly the right amount of gas to match that air. So even though a dirty air filter reduces airflow into the engine, it doesn't affect gas mileage because the computer is always precisely matching fuel to the incoming air. In other words, a dirty filter means less air, and less air means less gas, so there's never an imbalance between air and fuel. Certainly when a filter gets really, really dirty, it can cause performance problems, but even then it may not affect gas mileage. So how long do air filters last? Unless you drive in really dusty conditions, air filters usually last 30 to 60,000 miles. Overselling of air filters is an enormous problem, and the best way not to be taken is to learn how to check your own air filter and check it twice a year.
Now, back to Goss's Garage with your host, Pat Goss.
Goss's Garage on TuneIn.com. Please note our new show time every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. All right. Mark. Mark says, greetings from South Africa. I have a question regarding oil specifications. I have an LS2 6.0 V8 motor. LS2 is the well, the LS series of motors are the newest General Motors V8 engines that they're used in everything from Corvettes to pickup trucks and SUVs and so on. I have an LS2 6.0 V8 motor that, according to the service manual, requires 5W30 fully synthetic oil. Is there any validity in the advice that due to the temperatures we experience here in Durban, South Africa, winter lows of 8 degrees centigrade, summer highs at 38, that I should be running 5W40 as this deals more effectively with temperatures? All right, the thing here is, this is a daily question that I get. And for the most part, my answer is really simple. If the owner's manual says to do it, I would. But unless the owner's manual recommends going to a higher viscosity oil at a given temperature, I would not do it. Now, I don't know where people came up, well, I guess I do. They came up with the idea that thicker oils are better. See, back in the day, they used to build high-performance engines, and they had different clearances between parts inside than conventional engines. So they often required a thicker oil. So I guess people thought, okay, high-performance engine gets run harder, requires thicker oil, therefore thicker oil is always better. Well, that's not the case. See, the job of oil, and it has many jobs, but one of the jobs of oil is to fill the gap between moving parts and keep them from touching one another. Well, back in the day, they didn't have CNC machining and computers and all this other stuff to make these engines as precise as a watch inside. Literally, as precise as a watch. Now, modern engines, the clearances between the parts is less, so they require thinner oil to fill that gap. Now, you put thicker oil in, and if you know anything at all about fluid dynamics, one thing you would learn really quickly is that as you increase the viscosity of the oil inside an automobile engine, you're trying to squeeze a thicker oil through a smaller gap. And that means that on the backside, we're going to get higher oil pressure, which tricks people into thinking they've done something positive. But on the other end, you're going to have lower volume, less flow through the engine. All right, now, what goes on here is real simple. Oil is a coolant. Not only does it lubricate, but it cools all of the things that it lubricates. And when they designed the engine, they determined how much flow was necessary to remove the heat from the crankshaft, the connecting rod bearings, the valve lifters, the rocker arms, all of these things that are lubricated. They all have to be cooled, and there's no coolant flowing through any of these lubricated parts because coolant and oil can't mix. So, the oil is what cools all of the lubricated parts inside your engine. Now, we want to have the proper oil flow, proper amount, so that we get the cooling that we need. We want the right viscosity so that we just nicely fill the gap between the moving parts. And that was what the manufacturer did when they designed the engine. They also determined what oil would be best. Now, they may have some recommendation in an owner's or service manual that says under certain circumstances to use a different oil. Fine, do what they say. They designed the car, they built the car, they know what's best, not some person who changes oil for a living. See, you could change oil, do an oil change every half hour, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, And you would never, ever, ever, just by doing that, learn anything about the chemistry of oil or of fluid dynamics. So, see, when you reduce the oil flow, temperature goes up on the bearings and so on. As the temperature goes up, so does wear. Follow the owner's manual. All right, let's see. We have Chris from Silver Spring, Maryland. Chris, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Thank you, Pat, and good morning.
Yes, sir.
In late October of 2017, I bought a set of new tires for my car, and I noticed the date stamp on them was the 22nd week of 2016. And my question is, when is a new tire too old to be acceptable?
Typically 2 to 3 years.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's hard to find tires that haven't been in the pipeline for at least several months. And by the time they get to a tire store or a shop or someplace like that, like here in my shop, we rotate out, we consider them stale at 2 years, and we rotate them out. We can exchange them with the manufacturer and so on. But because, you know, they're put into a warehouse, then they sit there and they wait for somebody to place an order, then there's shipping time, then once they arrive at a shop, then you have to show up needing that tire, which may take several months of and by itself. And you have a Taurus?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't be typically most of the older Tauruses would not have what would be considered a really popular tire these days. So the less popular the tire is, the longer it would typically sit on the shelf.
Right. I was assured that it was the new tire was in a climate-controlled environment all that time. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would, you know, we have a storage area that's heated and air-conditioned and so on. And most places that sell tires are going to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, thanks for taking my question.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking it. Good question, by the way. That's something that not enough people pay attention to. We see some cars come in, brand spanking new tires on them, 5, 6, 7 years old. Oh my God. No, thank you. Hey, write down the number 844-885-4677. Give me a call during the week. Leave a message. I'll get back to you. Thanks for listening. And, of course, thanks to Steve McMillan and George Stockton for producing today's show. For everyone here at Goss's Garage, I'm Pat Goss. Until next time, please, everybody, drive gently. We'll see ya.